So in the previous hour, we had the Principal Secretary for the National Treasury. In the next hour, we are going to have the Principal Secretary in the State Department for East African Community Affairs, Abdi Dubat, is a PS. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
I'd like to wear that thing on my lapel as well.
I can give it to you after this. Yes.
So I don't have to be Serkal.
It is unwise. It is unwise to give it to him.
Niko na jacket
You
pia.
give it to me first.
Wazee kwanza?
Yes.
Basi imeisha.
Then you hand me down.
Yes. Next week tutakupatia wewe pia utembee naye. Then tutampatia mdu weekend. Yes.
Ndio yake ni weekend.
Yes.
Sawa. Karibu sana PS.
Asante sana.
It's good to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. My first time on in studio radio sort of conversation. So I'm
There's
looking
always a
forward.
first time.
Yes.
And you're like
Be nice,
fish to
be
water.
nice.
You're already comfortable. Let's make it very nice. CT will give you the day's proverb.
Yes.
You will then translate the proverb. This week's proverbs are from?
The Republic of Benin. Not to be confused with the state in
Benin is the capital of Edo State in Nigeria. It used to be Benin. It's still Benin City, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a capital of?
Edo State.
EDO.
Yes.
All right.
It's not a state.
No, it's not a state.
Why not?
Okay. I'll talk to Bola Tinubu and see if
Many words do not fill a basket.
Many words do not fill a basket.
Yes.
P.S. What's your interpretation of it?
Many words do not fill a basket. That's a loaded one. I guess my interpretation of that is that there is more than just talking. There has to be action, and that it doesn't matter how much conversations you have. Ultimately, these have to translate to some substance, and probably reduce the talking and increase the action. That will be my simple interpretation of that proverb. Yes.
Spot on.
Vitendo.
Yes.
Kata kiko.
Because words are simply just air.
Yeah.
Now, unless something is done to give the words life, then it's as empty as an empty basket.
Right. Nice one. Abdi Dubat, please introduce us to the State Department for EAC Affairs. What's a ministry? What do you do?
Thank you very much, Eric. If you'll allow me, is it possible for me to first talk about EAC
Yes.
before I come to the
Yes.
State Department? That way, at least our listeners can get a feel for what it is we're talking about here. The East African Community is a regional intergovernmental organization that came into being. The treaty for the establishment of the EAC was signed on 30th November 1999 by our then head of states, His Excellencies the Daniel Arap Moi, Benjamin Mkapa, and Yoweri Museveni in Arusha. And the treaty was ratified, and the EAC came into being in July 2000. Now, these three partner states, and I use the word partner states because that is the language of the treaty. You'll notice we are not calling them countries or members or member states. They are partner states because the objective of the community was for all of us to be partners on the table and to grow together and have a similar and common vision for the good of our people. And this EAC then grew in around some time later. The Republic of Burundi and the Republic of Rwanda were admitted into the EAC, and we became 5. In 2016, the Republic of South Sudan was admitted, and we became 6. In 2022, we admitted the Democratic Republic of Congo. We became 7. And as you're aware, in the summit meeting of the 24th November last year, which was held in Arusha, we admitted the Federal Republic of Somalia. Now we became 8. So the EAC is a regional intergovernmental organization comprising those 8 partner states. And the overarching aim of this East African community is for us to widen and deepen regional integration. And we do that by identifying areas of cooperation And in the current community, we cooperate in almost all spheres of our economy, whether it's political, economic, social, areas of defense, areas of IT, and we basically have cooperations in almost all the areas and all the sectors of the economy for our mutual benefit. And that probably just tells us what the community is all about. Now, the treaty requires that each of the partner states does have a specific ministry that will be interacting with the community. And that, therefore, the Ministry of EAC is a creation as a result. So we have the Ministry of EAC, Sales and Regional Development, in the Republic of Kenya. We have 2 state departments in that ministry. Mine, which is the East African Community Affairs, and my brother, Kelo Harsama, is the Principal Secretary for Arid, Semi-Arid Lands and Regional Development, which is the other state department in the ministry. So that is basically what it is all about. The State Department, of course, has a mandate, and that mandate was given to us by His Excellency the President in the Executive Order 2 of 2003. It has a lot of functions that have been given by His Excellency the President, but in a nutshell, ours is a coordination ministry. We coordinate the activities of the government in the space of EAC. And we ensure that the programs, the regional programs and projects of EAC are implemented. We are also mandated to sensitize the public and create awareness about EAC. And there is the Northern Corridor integration projects, integrated projects, which is basically also a mandate that has been given to the State Department. And the significance of the Northern Corridor in our regional integration.
Yes.
So amongst very many other issues. So in a nutshell, that's what the State Department for EAC does, and that's what our mandate is. And generally, that's what EAC is.
So 24 years since the treaty came to life, there were, of course, many things that were targeted by the 3 heads of state and then subsequent other heads of state and leaders. And this is looking at how we can integrate and become one homogeneous, peaceful, coexisting community. Economic integration, social integration, political integration. Many have said we have made progress. Others have said we make progress, but we still shoot ourselves in the foot when it comes to many of these things. Let's talk about economic integration, for example. How far are we as a community?
Eric, the East African community have given themselves 4 pillars of integration. That's what we're all about, 4 pillars of integration. The first pillar is a customs union. And with the customs union, we have a customs union protocol that basically liberalize market space. That means that we trade amongst ourselves with goods and services with 0 duty. Of course, in the same customs union as well, we trade with third parties using a common external tariff, and we have rules of origin within that space. The second pillar of integration is a common market protocol. In this very ambitious protocol, we are saying that as partner states, we give ourselves freedom of movement of the 5 factors of production, and we give ourselves, as citizens of the community, 2 rights. These 5 freedoms, so 5 factors of production, are freedom of movement of goods, of services, of labor, of capital, and of people. And we have the right of establishment and the right of residence. So from that picture, you can see it means basically you can move to any part of the community, work in any part of the community, live in any part of the community. Extremely ambitious, and that is the second pillar of our integration. The third pillar of our integration is the common market, is a monetary union, the East African Monetary Union, which is IAMU, and the IAMU protocols basically, in a nutshell, are zeroing in on us reaching a place where we have a single currency. You will call it maybe the East African shilling or whatever we call the currency. That is what basically the protocols anticipate. And we have to move towards that space where we are going to reach a point where we have a single community currency.
Fourth.
And the fourth pillar is the political federation. Now, of course, at the inception, our founders anticipated that we'll reach a point where we'll have one political federation. At some point in 2017, the head of states sat down and realized that we are still a bit far for us to have a conversation about a political federation. And we revised that to a confederation. And that is the fourth pillar of integration. And there's activity towards that end. In terms of the economic integration, which I will probably say the first three pillars are achieving, where are we? I think we are doing well. We are doing very well because in the customs union, we are a single customs territory as EAC as we speak. We are managed by a single East African Customs Management Act, which means that everything in the space of importation and trade in that space has been harmonized. And we are doing very well in that pillar. In the common market protocols, that is where there are some challenges. There are still areas where we have not liberalized. We have not reached that space where there's total freedom of movements of people, goods, capital, and services in the community. And there's a challenge in trade in services and liberalization of a few of that spaces. But we still have done a lot also in that area. Because you will notice that, for instance, Eric, your passport does not read Republic of Kenya. It reads the East African Community, Republic of Kenya. That electronic passport is an East African project. And that's where we're headed to have identity as one region. We have one-stop border posts. You'll notice that it's not the same if you're in Malaba, if you're in Busia, if you're in Namanga. Previously, it was very tedious. You'll come on one side, deal with the Kenyan authorities, take your time, move to, maybe if you're going to Namanga, the other side, now start engaging the Tanzanian authorities again. And there was a lot of time being consumed at the border for just clearance of a person. You can now imagine what the people who are clearing goods and lorries were facing. And now we have eliminated that challenge by having a concept you're calling the one-stop border posts, which is the concept that exists now in most of our key borders. In that space, we have all our customs authorities under one roof. The Ugandan Revenue Authority and the KRA person will be seated like the way I myself and Du are seated here in the same roof. And the same also in Namanga, where you come, you stand in front there, you get your passport stamped, you move to the next counter, you get your passport stamped, and you move. And that has saved a lot of time for our people. Therefore, we've eased that space of movement within the community. If you look at in Kenya, in Uganda, and in Rwanda, movement can actually be done using an identity card. An ID card, you don't need a passport to go to Rwanda now. You just go to the airport with the ID, and you go to Rwanda, you go to Uganda. And many such other basically achievements have come as a result of us trying to actualize our common market protocols and the economic integration in that space. A lot also in the space of trade. It's in the northern corridor. It's easier and for goods to be cleared from Mombasa. It used to take forever to reach Kampala, and nowadays the times have reduced significantly, the costs have reduced significantly. Being a single customs territory, you clear your goods even before they land in Mombasa. At the single point of entry, you've cleared, and the next time you're actually having anybody checking anything is when you've taken your goods to either Kampala or Kigali. Unlike before, the whole space and the infrastructure within the corridor, including leveraging on technology, when the trucks come in, they're loaded in Mombasa. They are basically put on a KRA, will put on a seal, which has a regional electronic cargo tracking system, so you don't have to worry about whether that truck is going to dump something in Nakuru or Eldoret. We are sure that, and we are monitoring that truck to see that it exits the country and it goes to the point of destination, and so many other achievements. So I know there are critics of the community who say that we haven't done well, but the nature of integration is that it is time-consuming, it's tedious, and when you're involving so many people, the decision-making process is a bit slow, but we are making significant progress.
Sure.
As a PS, I'm confident that we'll get there.
Even as you say that, I think one of the things that we look at when we look at regional bodies, it doesn't matter where we look at them around the world, is that the very nature of implementation is dictated by a desire or political will. We can't run away from political will when it comes to regional integration. And that just from your description, there's so many things that have happened. There's so many things that are done. I think Kenyans, on this side of it, would say, look, you wouldn't be able to travel in the manner in which you are able to today, some years ago. And then, unfortunately, we want to look at the big ticket items. Regardless, people want to know, when we're having conversations about travel, why is air travel still so expensive in the region? Because we think about other regional bodies. Let's just, everybody's going to point to it, but let's do it for the sake of conversation. Look at the euro. You can be in Copenhagen today and go to Paris tonight, and you spend under 100 euros to travel. And this is because they decided that this is what they were going to do and followed through on that. The appetite for follow through is clear. It's evident here at the AAC. We can see that from some of the things that you said. What are the challenges that then stop us from going from now where we are to the next point, even as the conversations are simmering?
Thank you very much, Ndo. As I had said earlier, the decision-making process in EAC, like any other regional body, are a bit inefficient and longer. And this is by design. When you look at the community being formed in 2000, when we started, we were three partner states. And we had come from a place where we had an EAC 1, if I call it. Between 1967, for 10 years, we had another EAC, which collapsed in 1977. There were a lot of allegations and counter-allegations on what caused the collapse. There was a lot of mistrust, and between Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, people were, had all sorts of narratives flying around that some people benefited more than others, and all sorts of things. So when we came to the table to form EAC, if I'll call it version 2, of course, trust building was one of the most critical components.
How is that coming along?
It's coming along well. I think we've made some significant progress because it's been 24 years and people have seen that we now know what the conversations are.
Have we learned anything from the East African Community 1? And
yes.
if so, what are these lessons?
Yes, we did. So let me just execute my first point and then I'll come to yours.
Yes.
So what happened therefore is that we designed the treaty that governs us and the rules of procedure to ensure that we have consensus on everything. And quorum is 100%. That means we must all be on the table and we must agree on everything to move. And you can imagine how difficult that is, especially when you're having conversations that are sometimes very technical, that require harmonization of very national laws and policies. And that is where now we're having the challenge of the speed. And that's why it's taking longer to achieve some of the objectives. However, of course, then at some point, and as we grow now, we're 8 people, we have to learn those lessons. It means that it's inevitable at some point that we have to amend our treaty. We have to amend how we make our decisions. We have to amend the rules of procedure that govern us so that we can say that all of us have to be on the table at all the time to agree on everything for things to move. And that is now the space that we are in. We are currently in the process of reviewing or amending our treaty, and those conversations are going on, and each of us at the region are sort of putting in forward proposals to amend and what we think are the areas of amendment, and that conversation will soon come to be concluded.
Okay.
But yes, what have we learned? We've learned a lot. Political will. And I think that is something that is very evident, that the head of states, which are basically the institutional framework of EAC, is that we have the summit, which is the summit of the head of states and head of governments that give general direction to the EAC and impetus to the integration process. And under them we have the Council of Ministers for EAC and the Attorney Generals, and then we have a coordination committee, which is basically the permanent principal secretaries, and it's supported by 3 organs, which is the executive. We have the Secretariat, head by a Secretary General. We have the East African Legislative Assembly, which is the legislative arm, and that's IALA. We all know about IALA. And then we have the East African Court of Justice, which is basically the judicial arm, and all these organs work together in that framework to ensure that we move this agenda of integration. And the political will, because the summit of the head of states now gives impetus, the political will is there, and I think almost all of the head of states have been very, very deliberate in ensuring that agendas that come to the table are discussed, we also opened up this integration process. Unlike previously, it is a people-centered integration. So the people are right in the middle and the focus of this integration, because we conduct public participation in almost everything that we do in this region. We consult as many people as possible, and we have widened that space. And that is actually also some of the lessons that we have learned. The other lesson that we have learned is that there were so many other players and stakeholders who were never involved. The private sector, whether it is women and youth, whether it is civil society. And these are people who are missing from the conversation in EAC 1. But in EAC 2, everybody is on the table. So because everybody is on the table, because all of us have to be, have to have consensus, it becomes a bit slower in making those decisions. But to be honest, I think so far the decisions made, we have never gone back on the critical decisions that we made. It's just that the pace is a bit slow.
It takes a long time to make the decision, but once it's made, it's made.
Solid, yes. Thank you.
Our conversation this morning is with Abdi Dubat, who is the Principal Secretary in the State Department for EAC Affairs. We're talking about the East African community, the integration, the journey, what's been done so far, what's remaining to be done, the challenges, the gains. Yes, recently when Kenya signed a deal with the EU, there was a lot of disquiet from those who said, all right, so why is Kenya going into this alone and not as a region? Yet, like you've said, we have, common protocols, a common external tariff and all. And this then was people were saying that this is going to have an impact on some of these community tariffs that we have and community trade pacts that we have. A journey had been started to have a common conversation as the East African community with the European Union. And then Kenya went ahead and signed one alone. The same conversation has been happening about Kenya signing a new trade pact with America. Conversations are ongoing. Why not follow the East African community negotiating as a big bloc? What's the justification for this?
Eric, I agree with you. Under the customs union protocols, we are single customs territory, and we should be able to negotiate trade agreements with third parties. And they're basically rules for negotiation of these trade parties. Article 37 of the customs union actually speaks to that, about third party arrangements. But it actually allows a partner state to negotiate and have trade agreements with third parties under some conditions that we actually let know of the community. We communicate that to community, we share the agreement, and that it does not injure the spirit of the customs union. And I think that in that space we've done very well. For the EU EPA, it's actually an EAC EPA. Yes, because this conversation started as with the EAC, and we've been having that conversation with the EAC for a long time. And at some point, we have a principle in the treaty called the principle of variable geometry, which means that we are able to allow partner states, or one or two or three of them who want to move a bit further, to do that. And I'll be able in a minute to demonstrate how we've used that effectively elsewhere. And the summit of head of states said that they allowed any country that wanted to continue to sign that EPA and who are ready to sign to go ahead and do so, while the rest are basically trying to look into the agreement and see when they will join. And that is basically when Kenya went ahead and signed the EPA. It doesn't injure our relationship with the rest of the community, because the Republic of Rwanda signed and ratified it and is now coming on board, and we have quite a number of other countries who are also interested. And
so they're signing on to the same one?
Yes, they will be able to sign on to the same one. You see, right now it's Kenya and EU, but the space for EAC. So everybody else will be coming on to sign on to the same. It's just that then they will come and find us on the table, and because they're our brothers, we'll be able to hold their hand and allow them to. And which was the spirit of what Kenya was trying to achieve. And therefore, there isn't a disquiet in that space, because we have subsequently progressed that conversation in the region. And we are having a conversation about who as a region because countries by nature, and especially Kenya, is slightly more aggressive in looking for markets, and it's not only us, everybody else is doing that now. We've come up with some sort of a concept note, a proposal on how we need to negotiate, who we need to start looking at, and what markets. And as EAC, we have identified around 10 markets that are ripe for us to start looking at together, and we've prioritized those. So we have now 4 markets that we've prioritized. UK is one of them, UAE is the other one, Pakistan, I think, is one, and I forgot, and I think maybe Singapore. And that is something that we've passed together as a region. So you can see, and in those spaces, you'll see that Kenya already is a front runner. Kenya already has established relationships, and Kenya already had started conversations even with UAE. So it makes it much more easier, because whatever we do, whatever agreements that we sign as the Republic of Kenya, to the extent we are discussing market access, to the extent we are discussing tariffs, then EAC becomes a critical player, because then we are in a single customs territory. So it's not possible for us to have conversations that will injure the protocols that we have. And Kenya is not desirous to do so. And all the time we are having any conversations, we are speaking to our partners, we are having conversations with them. Yeah. So there are some challenges you'll find, for instance, in the space of UK. There was a challenge because, because all the other partner states, except Kenya, is a least developed country. They have what we call everything but arms trade with the EU and even UK. And so basically, they already have, they already have access. They already have access to that market. So the moment Kenya is not in that space of an LDC, and when we had a challenge when there was Brexit, and UK is a critical market for Kenya, we had to go ahead and have a conversation. But we started it again as an EAC UK conversation. But there was some, again, I said, because of the decision making, and we have to do it all together. There was some. The space was not fast, because we had a deadline, the 30th, I think, of December 2000. The market access for Kenya was going to come to an end, because from 1st of January 2021 we had to have something in place. And we again went ahead and signed an UK EPA. And subsequently, again, those conversations are going on. And now the whole of EAC is coming to the table to have conversations with the UK. That is basically what I like to say about that topic. So it means that we are a bit faster in Kenya in trying to do these things, but we are not doing so at the expense of everybody else, and we're not injuring any of the protocols that are in place. We are trailblazing,
and then the others are, joining us along in the journey.
Yes.
Are there areas within the East African community where some countries are feeling unhappy with Kenya? Example, Uganda, G2G. We saw what they said and what the president himself said. Yesterday, the president of Uganda, met, and just reading from what the president of Kenya said, I'm glad the issues affecting the flow of petroleum products between Kenya and Uganda are being resolved. We have agreed on a way forward, focusing on scheduling imports for the region in a manner that will ensure we achieve the most competitive pricing and maximum logistical efficiency. In my meeting with President Museveni, we also discussed the need for the two countries to urgently pursue the design and construction of the earlier conceptualized Eldoret-Kampala-Kigali refined petroleum products pipeline. That conversation has been revived, but this is coming on the back of Uganda deciding, all right, we're also going to use the port of Tanga for our oil imports, and that may be affecting the business between Kenya and Uganda.
Well, Eric, this year, in 2024, we woke up to a lot of, and I think most of my friends have also been calling me on the same issues. There are always going to be issues in this region. And that's the nature of this region. For instance, that there are issues between Rwanda and Burundi. Burundi closed the border, and that border still remains closed. Yep. You know about the issues of DRC and Rwanda, and the whole space of peace and security in the eastern DRC. Kenya and Uganda have very strong and cordial relations. Uganda is our largest export market, and we have a lot of history with Uganda, and that relationship will never be jeopardized by both of us. And we have very solid conversations, not just at a regional level, but at bilateral level with the Republic of Uganda, because the nature of our relationship is slightly more it's different from the relations that we have with other states. And therefore, on many occasions, we have bilaterals to discuss very many things. The issue of petroleum is a bit unfortunate, because I know that the Republic of Uganda felt that the need to even go and escalate the issue to the East African Court of Justice. It's the first time, because we've always had conversations with the Republic of Uganda, and today there are issues. Yesterday there were issues which were resolved. Tomorrow there will be others. And that is the nature of two people who are doing business. And that's the nature, because even other than just the G2G, that's the only thing that has come up. There are several other things that we've been handling, behind the scenes, as two states and as two friendly nations, conversations and resolving them. Because sometimes it's, in fact, if you look at the biggest problem we have with Uganda and ourselves is non-tariff barriers. And these non-tariff barriers are basically technical, policy, and administrative barriers to trade. Sometimes against even the protocols that exist. And they happen in one way or the other, sometimes deliberately, sometimes not. And accusations and counter-accusations, you're stopping us from doing this, you're stopping us from bringing milk, you're stopping us from this. And these conversations we always have, and we resolve them. At the regional level, we have mechanisms for resolution of such problems, including non-tariff barriers. We have regional monitoring and evaluation and also resolution mechanisms for these non-tariff barriers. So I have no problem with the Republic of Uganda. I know that this issue has been escalated to the highest levels of government, which again is our presidents, and this issue will be resolved. If you look at the issue you mentioned of petroleum, I will want to come to the previous point I had made of variable geometry. Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda were progressing slightly faster than the rest of the EAC in many aspects. I'll give you examples. I give you the example of the ID. The ID, you can only travel to Uganda and Rwanda. So far, everybody else has not come up, because we're trying to harmonize that space, and there are some components, including us, not having machine-readable ID cards. Machine-readable ID cards are a prerequisite for that arrangement. If you look at, we have a single tourist destination between those three countries. So we have an East African tourist visa that you can come into Kenya, you pay $100, and you're able to visit Uganda without paying anything, all the way to Rwanda, in one tourist circuit, and come back and go. And you can do that from any of those three countries. We have one area network. So you'll find that if you're in Uganda and if you're in Rwanda and you call Kenya, the calls are very cheap, because the roaming expenses have been eliminated from that originating and terminating of the calls in those three partner states. Now we have Tanzania, which has joined in. They have already amended their law. We're just trying to do the administration. Burundi has expressed interest to join in, and that is what variable geometry does. We allows those three people to go. We test pilot the thing, ensure that everything's done, and everybody else will catches up when things are done.
Why is Tanzania always so slow to do these things? It's
not really, it's slow. They have procedures for basically, every country. We have again another principle of sovereign equality. Every partner state is sovereign, and we are all equal in that sovereignty. So we cannot be able to question a country's intentions, but neither are we casting any aspersions, but every country is different in terms of how even there are areas where we are slow, because our constitution and our lawmaking processes are very, very rigorous, and we subject a lot of things to public participation and to move from one place. Whereas other countries, it's easier to actually, amend administrative and framework. So it's not something that is peculiar to them. It's something that is different. So every country has to be looked at differently. The legal and national frameworks of their laws are different. So I would say that I wouldn't say they're slow, because a lot of allegations are made against United Republic of Tanzania, but it's not true. If you look at in terms of commitment to this regional integration, Kenya and Uganda are very strong. Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda are very strong. We are the founding members. We are always the first to pay when it comes to monies. We are the first to commit to everything. The headquarters of the seat of the community is in Arusha. A lot of meetings are held in the United Republic of Tanzania. We've never had any issues from anybody, whether you're from Congo or anywhere else, to go and conduct business of the community in Tanzania. They have always been a country that is diplomatic and in welcoming. So there are a lot to be said, good things to be said about the United Republic of Tanzania. But where we have to move together again, as I said, everybody has to look at how they do their laws, how they amend their procedures, and that's where the challenges are.
We look at the EU, and they seem to have gotten to where we are aspiring to get to. And yet, if my history serves me right, we actually got there before them. If we look at East African Community 1. Now, where am I going with this? I look at the strength of the EU and how it is they've been, over time, been able to negotiate as the EU. How have we gotten to a point where we, as the East African Community, have negotiated, say, for instance, a trade deal with the EU or with America or with some of these other economic trading blocs as the EU?
That is
the East African Community, sorry, not the EU.
No, that's where we are going. And I said, remember, we spoke about the previous economic partnership agreements we are talking about for EU and the ones we are actually willing to. And that's where we're going. For instance, when you look at UAE and the markets that we're looking at, we said as a region, let's negotiate, as a bloc, so that we actually have EAC, UAE economic partnership agreements. US, we have STIP. Again, we started as an arrangement where we are looking at as EAC, and the US themselves have had a communication with and a meeting with the EAC, and have the desire us to get into some sort of a framework with the EAC. As I said, almost everybody, including the UK, including the EU, even tomorrow, EU is happy for everybody in the EAC to sign on. But the processes of the ratification of these treaties are that they have to be signed by individual partner states and they have to be ratified.
And I think, sorry, I have just to interject, and that, I think that's a hold up, isn't it? If we're talking about there needs to be acquiescence from each individual partner state, and I think the question is right there. Is there something that's holding up? Because the assumption is that there's an understanding across board about the importance of these things, right? And each of these members are in on the conversation. So where is the challenge then? Understanding that it's a process and it takes time. So is the challenge in that there is still reluctance on the side of either party to say, okay, well, let's look at this over and over again and see if it is really beneficial? Because still, regardless of whether it's part of a community, we have to take into consideration that self-interest as a nation and the tenets of sovereignty take precedence over any community. It doesn't matter what it is that you're doing. So when we look at the process and we say it's going to take time because each entity needs to sign or ratify on their own before they now bring for common ratification.
Okay.
Do those tenets come into play here?
Yeah, you see, the stage of integration that we are in now is different from where the EU is. And I come back to where the concept of EAC is in terms of integration. If we were to flow smoothly, by now we'll have fully actualized the common market protocols. We will now, because we had our first objective for the East African Monetary Union was 2024. We are in 2024, which means our original time frame and roadmap for IAMO protocols was for us in this year to have a single currency. You understand? And therefore, we'll have then moved significantly to a political confederation. In the conversations of the confederation, and I'll come to what Muga had said, is that the EU is in a different space in terms of integration. When we are talking about confederation, right now we have a team of eminent persons led by the former Chief Justice of Uganda, and Amos Wako is the Vice Chair, who are working on a constitution for our confederation. They are doing stakeholder engagements. They've done it in Burundi. They've done it in Uganda. And in Kenya, we had a whole cross-country engagement in May last year. And now they're going to the other partner states. Once they do that for all of them, the issue is we want to have a confederation. How is that confederation going to be? How does it look like? What organs and structures will it have?
Sorry, Piers, what's the difference between a federation and a confederation?
Yeah, so now again, it's how much of the sovereignty that you cede. You see,
Right.
in a because we had said that we haven't reached that level of that very close trust that has been built, that we are able to have almost one country, with central power in federation, like the US. But in a confederation, we only now that's the conversation we're having. We are going to run as confederal states with our sovereignty.
Right.
But we are going to cede some of our sovereignty to a confederate. Now, what are the powers that we want to cede to that confederate? How will it look like? What structures will it be? How will it interact with the confederates? You understand what decision makings will it have? How will it be funded? How will it be governed? This is the conversations we're having right now. Once we reach there, it means that if we cede some of our sovereignty to that confederation, that confederation will be able now to run what Muga is saying, that probably will be able to cede some of the sovereignty in terms of negotiating trade agreements, and that will be doing it together as a bloc. And
But
that's where EU is.
But
And we are
cede
not-
some of that sovereignty to each other and not ceding that to an external force.
No, we are
right?
ceding to each other. Yes.
Okay, so this is the question. I think I just saw a comment on that, and I wanted to ask about that because when we look at regional integration around the continent, there has always been a latent fear or a latent idea that there would be external factors that were against the idea of any African conglomeration in any way, shape, or form, because there is the potential for extreme success. Right? Common problems bring solutions. And one has to ask, the delays that we see with the total integration of the EAC, could that be that there is some external monkey on the shoulder of anyone, to say, well, let's delay this a little bit more, because the potential that when these countries actually come together and operate in trade, operate in integration when it comes to currency, operate in movement of persons and other matters of immigration, that they will be a force to be reckoned with. Is that a possibility?
Yes, there is. It is a possibility. I mean, nothing can be ruled out. Those hands are not very visible. They could be, behind the scenes. But it is possible that there are forces that will be working against the interest of this community, because, and that's the nature of nations, and that's the nature of politics, and that's the nature of interests. So we cannot be able to rule out, because. The East African Community is the most integrated regional economic bloc in Africa. We've done very well, and a lot of the other blocs come to benchmark with us. I still am very passionate about this EAC. I believe that we're able to move that individual faster. We're able to integrate faster. Unfortunately, as you said, there are things. Some of the challenges that we face, other than the issues that we mentioned in terms of the decision making, process of decision making, we have non-tariff barriers again, which are imposed we impose on each other. Very unnecessary, and we spend a lot of time discussing each of these, from eliminating one barrier, and it pops up tomorrow. Harmonization of the laws is again what I talked about. It takes so long for some countries, and you have no control of such things. But we have an issue of financing again. One of the conversations that we're having at the community right now is, are we financially sustainable? And even as we grow, as we expand, as we bring in more institutions and more other
But
organs.
does that not get to the heart of the matter of asking whether each of these member states are financially
Viable.
on their own? Because if we're talking about the unit, what about the individual members?
It's true.
Or are we teetering on?
No, it's
being
true. In
failed
fact,
states?
I was coming to that. You will find that there are some partner states who are not paying the dues to the community.
Maybe they just people don't like paying.
And that we are good as Kenya. We're always the first people to pay. Tanzania pays immediately. Uganda pays. Rwanda pays. But the rest have been having financial challenges. And you will understand. If you look at the economy of Burundi,
Explain to us what there is to understand here, so that I understand.
You'll understand, because the economy of Burundi is 9% our economy in terms of size. And when you're asking them to pay the same amount that the treaty, that's what I'm saying. One of the things that we need to amend in the treaties, and we're looking at this amendment, is that the financial model for EAC is that we all have equal contributions. The same way we said we have to have the same rights and consensus, we pay the same amount. So Kenya pays around $7.3 million to the Secretariat, and of course we pay another $1 million to other institutions, so just say around 8.5 million. Every country is supposed to pay that. So you're asking the Republic of Burundi to also pay $8.5 million every year.
Impossible.
In a small country like that, it's going to be a bit challenging. So we have now come up with a mechanism to look at financial sustainability. And one of the things that we approved in the summit last year is, can we change that financial model so that we actually have an amount that is fixed? Maybe now we have agreed on 65%, and then 35% becomes an assessed contribution, and it's pegged on some macro. For instance, for us, we talked about GDP. The GDP. That means Kenya will be paying the most. So these are some of the challenges that we are trying to ride through, and conversations that we're having. But ultimately, I think we've done well as EAC. There's still room for improvement. And we are very confident that if we continue with that pace, then we'll be able to reach the targets that we've set for ourselves.
P.S. We thank you very much for coming. And yes, your first rodeo on show has been good, hasn't it?
It's been excellent.
Right?
Thank you. I shall come back. Welcome you again.
Yes.
We are thoroughly educated.
Yes. Please come again. This conversation must continue. Abdi Dubat, Principal Secretary, the State Department for East African Community Affairs.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.